Welcome everyone to a music photography live Q&A with Sigma America. I'm Nick from Sigma, and today we're going to talk about music photography with our illustrious guests, Adam Elmakias and Anabel DFlux, both Sigma photo ambassadors. So welcome guys to the live stream.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
welcoming us. What's up?
First of all, let's introduce Adam. He is a touring photographer most days. Of course, this year has been a little bit different for him, but it's been a little bit different for all of us. So, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience in music photography to kick us off?
Yeah, I've been working in music for about 15 years now. Started in high school, started touring when I was 18, and have done that for most of my life. So I spend a lot of the time on the road, photographing musicians on and off the stage, just capturing, their show, what they do to hang out, and then here and there doing photo shoots for them for maybe a magazine or an album or whatever they might need. And yeah, and I love Sigma.
Thank you
Well,
for that last part.
yeah, I got you.
And Annabelle, you've certainly shot your fair share of concerts, but most of your work, at least that I've seen, has been promotional images or backstage. And of course, this year, like all music photographers have to deal with, a lot of it's been off stage. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've done in the past, what you're doing now, and some of your experience as well?
Absolutely. So, in terms of music photography, I've kind of done a little bit of everything. I've done the touring, the concerts, the portrait work. I got into music photography somewhat by accident. It wasn't actually something I was pursuing at the time about 11 years ago, but a friend of mine was dating a musician, and I was the only one who knew how to use a camera. And the rest is history on that front. But because I'm such a varied photographer, I love providing musicians with a wide array of types of work, from the studio to outdoor concerts, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So we're going to basically let the audience drive this. We want you guys to ask your questions. If you have any inquiries about music photography that you want to pose to Adam or Annabelle, please feel free to put them into the chat, and we'll do our very best to answer those questions. In the meantime, you guys have a few images, some of your signature photos over the last year or some from the past that you might want to share. So why don't we kick off this conversation with reviewing a few of your images and go over some of the details, some of the things that you've done and how you achieved those images in particular.
All right. Who you want to go first? You can kick it off if you want to.
You want me to go first?
I nominate you.
Okay. I
Annabelle,
have
you've been
been
Show me
nominated.
how it's done. Show me how it's
not.
done.
Oh, but showing the master how it's done. Well, I think this would. I'm going to share this one first. This one might be a fun one to share first because right before the pandemic hit, quite literally right before ending in February, I was on tour with a band from Finland. So life felt incredibly normal. And then when I came back, everything just closed off completely. But I think it's kind of interesting to kind of see how the last year had changed. This was shot with a 35 millimeter lens. I really, really love to capture musicians interacting with the crowd because I feel like the crowd really drives a concert so much. And when you see them really enthusiastic with the musicians on the stage, that creates a more storytelling shot. The reason I shot with a 35 is because I feel like stages tend to be very cluttered. In the sense that there's a lot of cables and instruments and multiple band members together. So when you're trying to focus on just one band member, you want to make sure that they're nicely isolated from everything around them so that the viewer's eye goes directly to them. And in this particular shot, it kind of showed the connection between the singer and the crowd reaching out to them down below.
What's the band?
69 Eyes.
It's not nice. It's like band
The
from
goth
Finland,
rock band from Finland.
Unnamed.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of too many Scandinavian rock bands, although I do know In Flames. So if you ever get a chance to get those guys.
Oh
big
yeah.
fan.
Did I tell you that one of my very good friends is in Flames?
No, you didn't tell me that.
Yeah. From San Diego, and he's their drummer now. But what I was gonna say is that is my most recent podcast episode. You should check it out.
Why don't you plug your podcast while we're talking about it?
Well, I'm not gonna swear, but it's called Don't Poop on the Bus. But instead of poop, it's another word. And if anybody wants to tour, Annabelle, you probably know that rule. If you ever go on tour, or even if you've traveled in an RV, you know, it's a
Yeah.
pretty big rule, but it's just it's a fun podcast if you're interested in the music world.
Even if you're not in the music world, it's a word to the wise. It's probably good advice.
Yeah.
We do have one question that came in, so before we move on to the next one, and this
Yeah.
is really the big one, right? This is for music photographers. George asks, how are you dealing with the downturn of music photography during COVID? So, yeah, the concerts have gone away, especially for people in your area in California. There's basically no public events going on. How is this affecting your lives, and how are you able to pivot?
Who wants to go first?
I'll go first this time because I think that's fair. And we won't.
Agreed.
All right, cool. Yeah. So, I mean, I think Anabel can probably relate to this, or anybody who's self-employed, but one of the skills that is necessary to be self-employed is you're very versatile and used to learning, and you kind of have a growth mindset. So because of that, even though this kind of changed our careers, I think that the people who are self-employed and do music photography are some of the most capable of audibling and doing something different. And so it was, not to say it was easy, but it was definitely within my skill set to find something else to do. And there's a lot of things you do outside of photography to be a photographer, especially in the music world, because it's not exactly the most profitable type of photography. This isn't wedding photography. So because of that, I had other things that I enjoyed that I could kind of switch it up and do. And I'm looking forward to concerts coming back, but in my opinion, I'm okay with them being gone because I think it's for the best right now, especially in a populated area like California. So I'll be patient, and I think that my life, just losing my career or my main job is bad, but not nearly as bad as what some other people had to deal with. So I'm very grateful and thankful to have the support systems that
That's a
I
good
do.
perspective. And of course, we're all very optimistic that things like this will return soon. And I think that once they do, we'll be able to revisit what made concerts and festivals and other large gatherings so enticing. We'll be able to revisit that and really appreciate them for what they are. Annabelle, how have you managed to change things around during this time?
So I'm going to see if this will let me flip to another image. I started doing this, just photographing musicians outdoors, because I found that the artists that I work with, they've become very, very reliant on their social media presence during this time, because a big thing is that you do have to be relevant to your audience base. And when you're not playing shows and you're not out there actively promoting, your only source of promotion becomes the internet itself, in
Mhm.
which case quality images become even more important because that's what people are looking at you for right now. So I just kind of switched gears a little bit and started photographing musicians for promotional reasons or social media content. And like Adam said so perfectly, is that as music photographers, you do become incredibly adaptable and you have to constantly change. I think that's a big thing in photography, actually, as a whole, is that you have to be geared up and ready for whatever change comes your way, because as an art form, it is ever changing and the market is changing and the world is changing in relation to art. So it's really what you got to do.
Yeah. Well, as an artist, as long if your intention is to get paid at the end of the day, you do have to adapt. So it's a good learning experience for everyone in this industry, and I'm glad that you've been able to find a way to adapt so far. We've got a couple other questions here.
Let's do
Regarding
it.
your on-stage photography, we have a question. How do you deal with the red light? Or, I mean, all the other colors of lights that are on stage. It can be difficult. White balance gets thrown off. You never know which one of those lights is going to be shining when the money shot happens. So how do you deal with all those different colors on stage?
Your turn.
My turn. I was like, I've lost a rhythm there. So
Okay.
I found that understanding how all the different colors of lights play with your gear and play with your camera sensor was really, really important. Figuring out how to photograph those types of lights, how to deal with them. I'm personally a believer that the band picked the color red for a reason. And attempting to alter that changes the perception of what that concert is, because that color has some sort of association with the song that they are doing. I'm big on capturing concerts for fans that weren't able to be there to be able to see it exactly as it played out. So I personally don't really alter the red. I might underexpose it just a little bit to try and save some of the details that I'm able to, and then in post bring that light up just a wee bit. But really, I leave it as natural as it comes.
Yeah, I can kind of vibe with that. I like to keep it relatively close to what the LD or artist intended. I'm not shooting for like a wire service, or I don't need like a crystal clear image of the artist. Unlike Anabel, I'm very unfamiliar with how my camera works. So I just kind of point and make sure the exposure is close, and then I'll make up for it in post. But for the most part, I think that the thing that really matters is, did you get a good shot and did you capture a good moment? And nobody ever complains about ISO, light, or any of that junk. It's just the photographers who notice it. So just as long as you're focusing on capturing a good moment, that's really all that matters. And I can kind of agree. I think even thinking of it as having to deal with it is the wrong mindset entirely when going to a concert. I would say embrace it. I mean, that is what's happening, and that's what you're there to capture.
I think that's a really good point, in that this applies to music photographers and wedding photographers and a lot of other clients that you'll be working for. They're not concerned with the technical details. They don't really care if you shot it at ISO 3200 or whatever. They really just want to make sure that you captured the moment and that it's not blurry. Um, and yeah, like you said, capturing that moment is really imperative. However, if you do have a lot of that red in there and you want to get rid of it, you've got a suggestion here from Elizabeth: make it black and white. So that's always a possibility.
Good solution. It works very well.
All right, so this one's kind of a general question. There's really no way to answer it, but maybe some of your suggestions will help illuminate this. What's the best lens for music events? Um, the thing that comes to mind for me, first of all, would be something that can handle low light situations, because most of them are going to be pretty dim unless you're lucky enough to have a spotlight on your artist the whole time. So um, throw some gear out there. What do you think?
All right, I'll go first.
I'm just
The
going to start calling on you guys now because
Perfect.
Adam went last time.
check. I would say my favorite lens. I'm just like Nick said, the most wide open lens you can get, because you want to have that ability to go, bright when you can, and then the heaviest lens you can carry. So I'll take the 120 to 300 2.8 because I think it's really fun. And you get I have like a monopod for it that I'll like mount on my hip because it's so heavy. But it's people look at you funny when you're shooting with that lens too. It's just so. But I mean, something that's definitely more affordable, I would say an 85 that opens up real wide is nice. You can, like Anabel was saying earlier, you can really separate your musician from their surrounding and all the distracting elements that you might not want to be in the image if you have a telephoto-esque focal length combined with a wide aperture.
What do you think,
Agreed.
Annabelle? Yeah.
I am absolutely obsessed with f1.2. If anyone has noticed my work, everything is so shallow. So the 35 f1.2 and E mount is my go-to. And yes, it's a fixed lens, so you don't have the option of zooming, but I really like to be kind of active when I shoot and really kind of participate in the moment that's happening in terms of moving myself around and framing it properly. So 35 1.2 I love. I also love the 85 1.4 and E mount as well, that are incredible.
So I guess that sort of answers a question we had here about what would you use for concerts, the art series, sports, contemporary. It really matters. It doesn't matter which line it is. It matters what the technical specifications and the focal length is that you prefer. So if
Yep.
you have a wide enough aperture that you can get plenty of light into your camera, and you have a focal length that lets you capture the moment, as Adam had said, that's what's really important.
And I like about Sigma Glass is that it's all very black and dark and low key, and that actually comes into play at concerts. So it looks slick. It reminds me of, I don't know, it's like it looks good. And I don't know, I like that.
The
It does.
Scandinavian bands will give you respect for that instead of showing up with a white lens.
I mean,
for
those
example.
7200, those 7200s of Canon from back in the day are just like, hey, I'm here, and you don't want that at a concert. You want to be hidden. So it's nice the art series is, and the art, it just looks. It's like, I don't know. I feel like it's like using an iPhone, or you know what I mean, or was like using an iPhone back in the day.
I'm with you.
Maybe
I
not.
It
get
is.
I get the sentiment. Let's take a second to say hi to Mark from Long Island. So he lives right around the corner from the Sigma headquarters. So hey,
Hey,
Mark.
Mark.
Hi.
Now let's see what we got here. Travis says, have you noticed bands squeezing the light for the first three and then opening up the lighting after the photographers leave the pit? So I guess meaning that you
Yeah, I
get
know.
some guys in there right at the beginning to get some killer shots and then they change the lighting afterwards? Is that how it works?
Well,
Eh,
maybe, well, Anabel knows this, and maybe it's not known to the people who are listening, but usually at a concert, if you're there shooting not for the artist, you're just there as like a photographer to shoot for press. You're just shooting the first three songs. And I think what they're referring to is squeezing. Are they saying like maybe the lighting's worse for the first three songs and then they make it better? Or is it better and then they make it worse?
I think what they're saying is that they'll increase the actual quality lighting afterwards so that you can get all of those in concert moments, right?
Uh,
So in the beginning, it's all very, I don't know,
I think
moody.
that's just a gradual build of a show for the most part. Like LDs are
yeah.
like, I want my photos of my show to look bad, so I'm gonna screw the photographers. Like the people who control the lights are, their main focus is just building a show. They want to start here and then kind of bigger and bigger and bigger. And if they
Build
start
to a
everything,
crescendo, right?
what's up?
They want to build to a crescendo. You want to start
Yeah.
from a certain point, and yeah, okay.
Yes. Good vocab. What he said.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, at a concert, to me, it's kind of like a movie. Like you build, you build, you build, then you have the middle point, then you have the big climax at the end of it. So you just kind of see the lighting building because, like, the encore songs I've noticed are the brightest because they
Yeah.
get
The
like all the
LDs.
lights on. Yeah.
Let's grab one more question when it comes to lighting. Kevin asks, how do you gauge your shutter speed when dealing with low stage light and musicians that are moving around on stage? So it's obviously a challenge that anybody who's trying to shoot action deals with. But in your situation, if you have people on stage and the lighting is not bright, then you have to get into the technical details. So what do you do as photographers to meet that challenge?
Ooh, I cheat a little bit. I use the frames per second on my camera, set it to burst mode, and fire off a ton of shots because there is a likelihood that even with some of the slower shutter speeds, you will get perfectly clear shots.
There's no shame in that, quite honestly.
Oh, I'm like,
And eye autofocus, all of those little crutches that technology has given us over the years, use it. Why not?
100%.
Yeah, tools. And sometimes if it's, first you open your aperture up, then you bump your ISO, and then your last resort is to lower the shutter speed to a level that might give you some, there's nothing wrong with some motion blur and some images to show the action that's going on stage. So as long as you're not at like 1 second, anything under that, if you can stabilize your arm, whether it be like mounting it on your body or doing something, setting your elbow on something, anything to kind of stabilize your camera will help. But as long as you're not at 1 second, you should be fine. And
You mentioned mounting a monopod on your hip. Just out of curiosity, how would you do that?
yeah, so you just literally you have the monopod not extended, so as small as it gets. So it's probably about the size of my forearm. And then you push it into your hip and then have the camera out. So it's almost like a triangle, if that makes sense. And then you kind of shoot that way. And you can also, if you want, another trick is to extend your monopod and put it on your foot. And you can kind of move your foot up and down to help with moving your camera up and down a little bit. And that's another little quick one. But it depends where you're shooting from. If you're in the photo pit, it might be hard.
That is brilliant, though.
All right, Adam, why don't you bring up one of your images and let's talk about some of the stuff that you shot in the past or even this past year.
Okay, this image is from this past year. I found it.
That looks
And
like a fun room to be in.
it's all the same person. So this is a DJ by the name of Diplo at his house in LA. And similar to Anabel, I was trying to find ways to do photo shoots during COVID when people would let me. So this was like really early on during COVID, and we couldn't get any like we had to sign waivers to do this and get our temperature taken. And I brought my roommate as my assistant because we didn't want to bring in any other people. And then it was just us and Wes is his name. And basically went to his room and picked out a bunch of outfits with him. And then we shot a bunch of sample images with my assistant in every area and marked each spot, and then went through and shot him in each area and then photoshopped it all together. So it's him doing a bunch of different things with himself, which I think is like pretty much what COVID is, just hanging out with yourself. So that was kind of the idea. And this was really early on when Tiger King came out. And
I was gonna say, was anyone actually watching that at any time?
no, we just put it on. But it was definitely a photo. It was like these kind of things really roughly inspired by like Gregory Crewdson. I really like his work. This is on a totally different vibe of it, but I like his big, scenes that he creates in cities with a lot of different things. So this is kind of the beginning parts to me trying to emulate his work. And yeah, I don't know. I think this was shot with a 24 or a 35. I'm not quite sure. I need to look, but it was really important to keep the camera in the same place after we started. So I just shot with remote. I actually shot with my iPhone connected to my camera, and I would just move around because I could be anywhere in the frame as long as I wasn't the one person that was being used, if that makes sense, from that shot. So yeah, that's the shot.
It's a very cool shot, cool scene, and a really good concept.
I wanted a portrait, and I like when you can have a portrait with somebody and have them doing multiple faces. And this is kind of the way to have he has so many different personalities. It was a fun idea to pitch. I pitched it to a bunch of other artists. Most of them were like, can we do it after COVID? Which I hopefully can make my way back up to LA and do that. But the idea is to just represent, he's very goofy. So his is more just for fun. I mean, he's got he's playing himself shirtless playing chess. So it's not like that serious at all.
How else would you do it, of course?
I mean, right? Can you really find? He used an image of him just with the chess players in there and the rest of the room empty. And I thought that was fun. And yeah, my phone is the one he's taking the selfie with in the bottom right. So I have a bunch of selfies on my phone because he wanted it to actually be him taking a selfie. So yeah, it's kind of fun. Should I stop sharing?
No, go for another one.
Another one? All right.
And while you do that, let me just remind everybody, please feel free to ask any questions about music photography, whether it's stage photography, concerts, or backstage things about the business, whatever, about gear. Feel free to ask. That's what we're here for.
Yes. Or about the photos or about our hair routines. We're very open to anything. I'm sure. All right, cool. This was an image that I took also with Diplo. I don't think it's the craziest. It's not crazy technical image by any means, but it's a moment that I really enjoyed. And this was taken during Carnival Festival in South America, which is there's usually like hundreds of thousands of people on a parade in the street for weeks at a time. And this was during a 8-hour moving DJ set on a float through the street. And it's like a whole bunch of different floats and they go all night. So I think we started at like 10 at night and ended at 6 in the morning or something like that.
Wow.
And I brought this is the behind the scenes of me using and I'm the guy who brings prime lenses to situations like this because I think it's so fun.
As
but
you should.
yeah, it was crazy. You like get on these floats and they're giant. They're like 2 stories. The whole top level is like live music being played. So that's where Diplo played with a band. And I was just up there for 8 hours drinking coffee, taking pictures. And then afterwards, there's all these venues on the side. And we went and played a few sets at these venues. It's just like the craziest party ever. Nothing like it exists in America. Their culture is so deeply rooted and tied to music down there that it was just an amazing experience overall. And a bad thing that happened, but an interesting thing to laugh at now, at the end of the night, we were with another photographer. There was a few models that were kind of part of our crew, and one of their photographers was playing with a drumstick at the end and ended up hitting me in the eye really hard with it. And so I couldn't see out of
hilarious.
Well, I'm a photographer, so it's kind of funny. I couldn't see out of one of my eyes for like 3 days. And the next day we had to go on a boat and it was really sunny. So I had to wear like sunglasses or cover my eye everywhere we went while I was trying to shoot. And it was just a disaster. My whole eye was like swollen. And yeah.
You didn't
so
shift
that was
to the other eye? I mean, I know.
Yeah. I actually have like, this is kind of random, but after a few years of shooting, I started getting a droopy eyelid, which is where this eye like shuts more than the other one. So I started shooting with my other eye consciously at one point in my career to make up for having the eye become lazy. So I kept strengthening it. So I'm ambidextrous with my eyes and shooting.
I do notice that like you get so used to shooting with one eye that you're like, oh, maybe we should switch that over.
Yeah. Anytime you do something with just one side of your body, you're like, maybe I should switch this up. Maybe
Yeah.
one thing is going to get really good or the other one's going to get really bad at it.
Yeah, I started to feel tension on that side of my face. I'm like, that's weird.
Yeah, switch it up. Do it now
Yeah.
before you get the droopy eyelid. If I saw you can kind of see it sometimes, but I was like, all right. And it's a real thing. I looked it up. That's its
Yeah,
medical term, droopy eyelid.
I think I've got one too. We've got a technical question here
Anabel,
regarding LED lights. So how do you overcome the banding that occurs on the big LED walls that you have on stage? Because that is, I guess, the most cost-effective way of creating big lighting effects on stage is with LED walls. So how do you overcome that technical hurdle?
Slower shutter speeds. I find this, I mean, I've noticed in my cameras that your shutter speed can go way faster than that light is emitting from the LEDs. So it's the flickering thing. You can turn on the flickering on your camera, and then I just shoot with a little bit of a slower shutter speed. And really, the LEDs only really end up in my shot when I'm doing a wide shot the whole band. So sometimes I might really, really cheat and expose for the LED screen and then expose for the band and combine the images. But you have to be very fast for that. I will tell you that.
Makes sense, though.
yeah, you could just bracket. I guess you could do that too.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a question from Meredith. She says, "Do you wear any type of brace to prevent carpal tunnel?" And I feel like this is a shot at Sigma for the size of our lenses.
No,
But
I've got a really good answer. I've
so
got
how
a
does that work?
Can I do a long answer?
Yes.
All right. I actually had a medical issue with my wrist like 7 years ago. So I am like if you're having troubles with your wrist, it's most likely because you're wearing a heavy backpack while you're shooting. So as long as your posture is correct and how you're shooting, the issue is if you're putting weight on your shoulders and holding your hands in front of you. So if you have to wear a wrist temporarily, that's fine, but don't use it for too long because I'm not a doctor. Disclaimer: don't use it for too long because then you're going to be required. So use it while you heal. But other than that, you just want to. The thing that a lot of photographers do is they keep a lot of weight on their shoulders. Whether it be, I used to use one of those holsters to hold the cameras on my side, and I did that every day, and I basically got to a point where my whole arm was frozen. So trust me, don't do it. And good posture. Honestly, go to the gym. Sometimes you have to train for some of these lenses. They're heavy, but the glass is worth it.
Agreed. I mean, even my chiropractor was constantly insisting that even if it's not heavy, just because you have to hold your arms out there, you do need to actually go to the gym and exercise your arms and build strength in there and build strength in your back as well, because it's not so much the weight of the gear as, like Adam said, the posture of it.
You want to have good form, right? You don't want to like be like this. You want to be like right angles, holding it strong, like putting the weight in the right place. Pay attention. If you're going to do it for a job, it's just like anybody, a tennis player, baseball player, a guitarist, they exercise and work out and stretch these muscles. And if you're shooting concerts, especially, or working on the road like Anabel, you're shooting for 10 hours a day sometimes. And or shooting a wedding. That's all day. That's serious stuff.
Yeah, I think that's something that's maybe less understood among the people who look at photographers. They don't understand how physical the job can be, especially with the amount of gear that you're carrying along with you. One of our fellow ambassadors, Liam Duran, just posted some images of him at the acupuncturist office, and it's from years of carrying around the gear and shooting outdoors and shooting from low angles and shooting from a higher angle and trudging around with a backpack full of lenses. It can wear on you, and I imagine that is the case no matter what genre of photography you make a living in.
Yeah, you got to do that upkeep.
Yeah, I think any career has that. any of them. Even just sitting at a desk comes with its assortment of problems as well. So whatever you decide to go into, you got to find ways to do it in a healthy way.
Yeah, I feel like I don't really need to work my arms to move this mouse around, but
Are you flexing? Are you saying you're really, really strong?
not saying that at all. No. But I'm working on it. Brian asks, what is the most difficult place that you've shot at? So what's been the most challenging gig for you? Anabel, why don't you start?
The tiniest green room on the planet at I believe it was a small venue in San Diego, but when a whole band of 5 people pack in there and they go, we want a group shot, and you're like inches away from them. That's when you work on your back strength and lift the gear
Here,
above
bust out
you
one
with
of
an
these. There it is.
ultra
That's
wide
the light.
angle. Yeah. Plus it gets really warm in there and just all around not too pleasant when green rooms are very small.
Agreed.
Adam, how about you? Apart from being on a float in the middle of Brazil, that
I think Diplo loves to do crazy stuff. So we went snowmobiling once in the Grand Tetons and it was like a blizzard and I've never snowmobiled before. And I had like a GoPro and I brought the Sigma, I always forget what they're called, like the fixed lens, like cameras I love, the FP. Is that what it is?
Oh, the DP.
DP. Yeah. I brought those with me because they were so easy to just, they're good in bright light and it was in the snow. So it was really easy to throw them in my pocket. And that was so scary because I'm not like an athletic person by nature. So it's very learned for me to do anything like that. And it was just terrifying snowmobiling and then having to take pictures. And then, oh my God, that's one of the days where I was like, I think I should have died.
Jeez.
It's scary. Have you snowmobiled before? It's hard.
I've tried, but I go really slow.
Oh, I wish that was the option. When you're with these people, they're like, hey, we're really good at this. Goodbye. And I'm like, well, this is scary. I was trying to find
So on the opposite end of the spectrum, what is your favorite spot to shoot? Jennifer asks if it was in the photo pit or on stage or in the crowd from the soundboard area. And she's actually joining us from Germany, so that's pretty cool. What's your favorite place to set up shop? Oh yeah, that's right. I'm calling on you guys. Adam, why don't you go for it?
All right. I like shooting in, if I could pick an ideal environment, I love a super hazy venue with a ton of backlight because I just like silhouettes and artsy images, and I'm not shooting like for Getty or anything, so it doesn't really matter what their face looks like. So it's just fun for me to kind of be able to play with the light and shadows and enjoy the lighting. That I've stood next to a Getty photographer that was like, please quit this lighting so I can shoot. And I was like, I love this. This is my happy place. Give me more.
No, just building on that real quick. What do the bands usually prefer? What do the artists usually like better? Do they like those
See it like we see
those
it.
Getty images, or do they like to have the stuff that the tour photographers are providing for them that's a little bit more under the radar?
I think it just depends on the person, to be honest. Like if it's like a big festival, they're probably like, I want that crowd shot with all the 100,000 people on it. But if it's like a small venue, they're like, let me get that artsy image of just me on stage so nobody knows there was 20 people at this show or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know. What do you think, Annabelle?
God, I mean, it really does depend. I feel like the musicians I shoot, they're kind of on either side of the spectrum. There's some they're like, hey, I want that like perfect stadium shot at the Whiskey A Go Go. Make it look like a stadium. You got this, right? And then there's others who go, well, we backlit for a reason and we want to be captured that way because it's a part of our sound, it's a part of our image, especially that kind of really gothy, vampy bands.
Do you think vampy? Like vampires?
Vampy, like
yes.
Yeah. There's like a whole vampire community in LA. It's crazy.
I've never found this and I'm okay with it.
I used to work at the goth clubs, so you would
It's
see
a big
them
part of the Anabel portfolio, and I love it.
I went to a goth party once in it's this venue. A lot of venues in Europe and UK will like transfer into other types of venues after the show's over. Usually it's a rock club, but we were in Cologne, Germany, and afterwards it turns into a straight like goth club, and it was I've never seen a darker room with the lights on. Like it was just so much black everywhere. It was awesome.
Oh, yes. The venues in Europe are just phenomenal.
Yeah, they're wild. Agreed.
Let's knock out a couple quick technical questions. What kind of focus mode do you use? Do you go with just straight up continuous autofocus? Would you go with a single point autofocus, or would you even shoot in manual focus?
Your turn, Anabel.
Well, continuous. I am the kind of person, because I shoot so many different types of photography as well, that any camera I get, the moment I take it out of the box, like batteries charged, continuous autofocus mode, and it just never leaves continuous autofocus mode.
Yeah, I'm continuous with back button focus. So.
And what about your exposure modes? Would you go with a manual so you can really maintain the exposure throughout your set, throughout the artist set, or do you just put it in an auto mode and figure it out afterwards?
Exposure mode. I do everything manual.
Same.
Cool.
I think for metering, I switch it to, if it's not already on Matrix, I'll do that. But for really hard shows, I'll switch it to spot metering so I can meter directly off of the artist instead of all the darkness behind them.
Yeah, I'm like a take a picture, look at the screen kind of guy.
Yeah.
All right, and then we've got one more here. What artists are still on your wish list to capture and why? And this is coming from Switzerland.
I love Interlaken Festival in Greenfield, Switzerland. Shout out. All right. Anyway, good festival. You'll know it. Wish list, living. Like these are realistic people or people who just wanted to photograph.
I mean, I guess we'd probably go with the living version, right?
All right, sweet. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got anything, Anabel? I'm thinking.
Rammstein. I just want to get that full stage shot of all of them on there in crazy costumes and performance. That's still been a big thing.
Gore still a thing?
Thing. R.I.P. to one of their members, but they're still a thing.
Yeah, I've shot them quite a bit.
Awesome.
They're the bring a plastic bag for your gear kind of moment.
Right. Make sure your lenses are weather sealed and or blood sealed, right? Is that the?
Yeah.
I shot them when I was like 17, and I remember I was in Chicago, and I was it was Guar, and they're like, "Hey, you guys got to leave after the first song. You're not allowed to be in here." But there was this one dude who was just hype on the show, and he was in there shooting with his DSLR, getting soaked in blood and didn't care. And he was like jumping up and down. I was like, that guy's living. That is the vibe. I'll never forget that. I want to shoot Eminem, photograph Eminem. I just love, I think he has a really cool jawline. And I don't know, he played like a big role in my childhood. So I feel like he's legendary in that genre. So I'd love to photograph him.
Yes.
Interesting.
We're just dropping hints here on
who
should contact us.
I don't know if you're ever going to be able to be like, I photograph Rammstein, here's the photo, because I feel like half the things they do on stage are not safe for work. And they're just like they're like, that band is wild. Especially.
I mean, that's why they don't come to the US very often.
I know. They're like massive in Germany, and here I don't think they could come here. People would be like, this is terrible.
I think I don't quote me on this, but I feel like I remember reading they were banned from the US for a little bit because of some of their performances that they did not notify the venue of prior to doing.
That's sick.
It's not something I'd argue is not true. It seems like it would be right up their alley.
Yeah.
I had a question for you, Adam. Since you just did an album cover judging with B&H Photo,
yes.
Do music photographers still need to look at album covers as an important part of their, I don't know, their overall portfolio? Because album covers don't really exist, so to speak. You're not flipping through CDs anymore, or cassettes or LPs or whatever. Is it really as important as it used to be to catch your eye and to deliver a message, to say something about that band or that record, the way it used to? Or is it still important just like it always was?
I think it's important from an artistic perspective. And the thing about album art that makes it good album art, in my opinion, is it should be identifiable at a distance. So it has like its thumbnail version where you see it and you're like, okay, I know what record this is. And I guess that has some viability when it comes to Spotify or streaming services because you can kind of see it catches your eye. But even more important these days, I know that vinyl is a very big deal, especially in the generation that kind of grew up on CDs. I think most of them have moved towards vinyl in their adult life, and artists being artists that put out music also, consider their music their form of art. So I think part of the package of the music is their vinyl. That being said, a lot of photographers, I think that it's a good piece to have in a portfolio, but yeah, I don't know if it's the same as when CDs were a big deal, but I don't know if it's less important now because you still see them on Spotify. You still see them on, you know,
I imagine it's
yeah,
more it's akin to a thumbnail, right? I
yeah,
mean, it means everything on YouTube, on a YouTube channel. That thumbnail has to catch your eye. Perhaps the album cover is that it fills that same role now.
yeah, I think so. I think that's more what it is. But like even me, or I don't know, Anabel can chime in. Like I've personally not photographed a lot of album covers with the intention of them being album covers. I've just worked for artists that are like, hey, we like this photograph. We're going to use it for our album cover. And a lot of artists, use like graphics and stuff these days too. So um, I don't know how
Same
big that
here.
market is.
What's
Yeah,
your experience been, Annabelle? Yeah.
it's been pretty much the same. I mean, there were a handful of times where I was booked exclusively for an album cover, but they were still printing physical CDs and vinyl. So I guess it just really depends. But for the most part, my case has been, hey, this shot's really cool. We're going to use it on an album cover.
Here's money. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, being really optimistic, let's say that we can all start getting back to concerts sometime this year. If you were to show up as the band's photographer or just shooting at the venue, what would be your go-to kit? If you had to choose maybe 2 or 3 lenses, what would you bring with you so that you know that you're taken care of in pretty much any situation? I know, Adam, you like primes, but is this a situation where you might bring some zooms?
It depends on the venue and like the size of the stage when you know what you're doing ahead of time.
Hmm.
So when I'm touring, zooms. Let me rephrase that. I should be taking zooms. But I love a good prime lens. So, but no, I usually go with one of the 20 or the 14 for my wide, depending on how big the venue is. I used to use like the Sigma fisheye back in the day, but those have kind of replaced that for me. I'll still use that fisheye if I need to put my camera somewhere. Sometimes I'll mount a camera, so that's a whole nother story. But that it's a smaller lens, if that makes sense. But so I'll use that, and then a telephoto like 85 or a 105, and then something in the middle, so 50 or a 35, and that's kind of my vibe.
Yeah. I agree. I should be taking more zooms with me, but I'm just such a sucker for the primes. So my go-to has always been 35, 85, 135. All at f1.4 or lower.
It's a good
1.8,
combination.
1.4, 1.2, because it never leaves its widest point on my camera.
So as we prepare to wrap things up here, first of all, I want to thank you guys for joining me on this live stream and giving me all your perspectives on the business of music photography, the gear that's involved, and all the other things we've talked about over the last 45 minutes or so. But the big question I have for you guys is, what do you see the future of music photography being? Things, of course, are going to change after this year, but on the other hand, maybe they won't change that much. Maybe things will get back to normal, so to speak. What are you looking forward to, and what do you think is going to happen? Annabelle, why don't you start?
That's such a
It's a
difficult
loaded question, yes.
yeah, question to answer, because I feel like we can all speculate, but we really won't know because it depends on the climate of the world and how everything is going in relation to what's going on right now. But God, I feel like live streaming is not going to go anywhere. It really is here to stay. And they do have photographers for some live streams. I photographed some live streams in actual venue settings. And there are, in the few places that shows are happening, from the photographers that I've spoken to, the photographer really is so incredibly isolated from the crowd because there is such a distance from the stage. And versus the crowd. So I don't think that intimate style packed shows are going to come back soon, but there's going to be a form of it.
Let me follow up on something real quick there. Do you think, when you said live streams aren't going to go anywhere, do you think that's going to be a viable way of having concerts going forward? Is this going to be a replacement for concerts?
I don't think it's ever going to be a replacement, because all the musicians I've spoken to, the fans I've spoken to, there is nothing that can replace actually physically presently being there. I mean, the musicians vibe off of the crowd as much as the crowd is vibing off of the musicians. And it kind of, I don't know, if I was a musician in that career choice, if I was told that I would never be able to play live in front of an audience member, it kind of starts to kill a lot of the purpose of being a musician. Besides creating the artwork itself, I feel like a big other part of that equation is performing it for others.
Yeah. Where do you think the business is going to go, Adam?
I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I'm
at
just
least you're
thinking,
honest.
no, I mean, to me, or at least in my mind, I think the photographer is the least important part of a concert. So by all means, bring back live shows and bring the fans in and let everybody be there for what they're there for. And then whenever the photography can enter again, cool. But I'm in no rush. I'm not like, I need to be here. It's a health hazard, but put me in. Or if it's not, then cool, like I'll go. But I'm in no rush. And yeah, like Anabel said, like live streaming is good, but it's just a separate entity entirely. It's not something that can replace live concerts. I agree with the reason she said, and it's just that, when it comes back, I think it'll come back. And I'm just, until then, gonna keep hanging out with you on Zoom, Nick.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to more Zoom meetings between us. And in the meantime, I just want to thank you guys again for joining me. And of course, I'd like to thank the Facebook Live audience for checking out this live stream. And hopefully you picked up some nice pointers, or at the very least, you were able to absorb some of the wisdom of Adam and Anabel and bring it into your work as we go forward. And we'll keep our fingers crossed that we can all get back to concerts sometime soon. For myself, that was the last time I went out in public. I went to go see one of my favorite bands at a restaurant basement in early 2020, and that was the last time I went to a restaurant and actually interacted with people other than my own family. So I am definitely looking forward to a return to form. So
Respect.
thank you guys, and thank you all out there for joining us. And until next time, I don't know, signing off. Is that what we do? All right. Bye,
Yeah.
everybody.
Hey, he's been Nick, I've been Adam, it's been Adam. We're good. All right, later.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.